Tim. I'm a producer, recording engineer, mixer, and I've worked with a variety of artists, including Shingy, Duffy, Roller Trio, and today we're going to mix a track. I came from being a player for many years, and then I just, being in love with records just naturally moved into production. It was sort of production first and then sort of learning engineering to do that for me. And the major thing that's changed is the sound of plugins. They've gone from being something that were kind of an approximation that had all sorts of problems, added all sorts of strange artifacts into the sound, to actually being almost in some cases indistinguishable from hardware. This beautiful Studio 900 has an amazing sound, but it does not have total recall. And so I'd be standing above this thing with a digital camera, taking like photos of the desk and then recalling mixes by zooming in and trying to see what an EQ was set to. It doesn't always necessarily come back the same way. The reality now is that, you have artists who need to earn money from sync, and some computer games company needs stems of a track that hasn't been stemmed out and they need it within 24 hours. Working in the box is pretty much the only way that you can reliably do that. So today we're going to look at a 3-piece rock track. The core of what's here is, a band playing live in a room. The individual parts are all sitting quite nicely. Everything sounds like pretty natural, but also like pretty punchy and alive. And we're just going to look at like the last few little details that make it a little bit more special. The snare here feels a little bit pokey. So we're just going to look at how we can use a compressor to maybe deal with that a little bit and just tuck that in. This is a model of a very nice DBX compressor that is fantastic on drums. So I'm going to start with like sort of 4-to-1 and set it until we're just starting to dig into that snare a little bit. Might be a tiny bit more lively on the mono one than it is. And now, if you listen, that snare is slightly more tucked in. If I take them off, that suddenly feels really pokey. That's doing a really nice job of keeping it under control. We have, I think, quite a nice presentation of the kit in the room. If I play you a bit where he's slamming away, he's playing nice and solid, it feels good. The one thing it might slightly be lacking is a little bit of size and a little bit of depth. I don't often use reverb on drums, but when I do, a 140 plate is often a really wonderful place to start because they just sound wonderful. And this model seems to be really good. I've got it set to about 2.5 seconds, which is quite long for drums. If you think about the decay of like a big space for playing music, something like, the Royal Festival Hall, something like that, it'll probably have a decay of about 2 seconds. 2.5 is starting to get kind of, sizable. So if I play you again what we just had without any reverb, and then we add the plate in, all of a sudden it just kind of grooves and moves. Feels like it has a different energy to it, and it sort of glues the sound together. It gives it warmth, and it doesn't have a kind of plasticky, algorithmic sound about it. It kind of feels like a plate, As soon as we get to the verse, and the verse has got a slightly dreamier quality about it, and I just wanted something that opened it up, and we can make those guitars shimmer and move a little bit. And so I'm using a combination of these two fantastic plugins, a Memory Man and a Dimension D chorus. Standard jangly indie guitar, and all of a sudden then we want to sort of move into a slightly spacier place. I'm starting with the chorus, obviously modeled on the classic Roland unit that still sounds amazing, but this has got a few extra features. We've got these little buttons here that open up this panel. The original unit only has 3 features, so 3 buttons. We have a 4th button. It just seems to sort of push the chorusness, adding a bit more like wet signal into the sound. But we've also got a couple of different oscillator choices here. So there's a default, which I guess is based on the response of the hardware unit. And then you have these 4 other choices where you have a sine wave, a rising sawtooth, a kind of random thing, and you have these sort of squiggly oscillators. It gives it more movement. The fact that there's less symmetry in what the oscillator is doing means that the modulation sort of jumps out and responds in a slightly more rhythmic way, which is really cool. We're just adding a little bit of delay to space it out a little bit. So if I solo the effect on its own, these things can sometimes sound a bit strange and a bit kind of wrong and unpleasant on their own. But the effect that they have adding into the dry signal is really lovely. If I play you that in the track, you can see the transition from the kind of solid intro into the more shimmery, open, slightly ethereal verse. This can be a technical job, but you have to approach it artistically. If you just do what is technically correct, you're not making music and you're not contributing to music. It's about interpreting the feeling of the song and trying to sort of facilitate that emotional journey. So when we get to the pre-chorus of the song, there's a whole bunch of other guitar overdubs that come in. So yeah, it's your kind of classic big wall of guitars thing. But we have a model here of an old Bell flanger. There's a lot of different things you can do with this flanger. It's got all sorts of amazing modulation possibilities. The really, really cool thing about the Bell one, in fact, one of the reasons I bought the hardware in the first place, is it has this manual button on it. Instead of it being controlled by an oscillator that's sweeping up and down, you can just click that on and you've got this knob where you can just I love that. I think it's really cool. We've got a cool sounding lead vocal. We need a bit of a sense of room, of ambience in with the vocal. We're just using this tape delay and it's going to be one single repeat. And as we push it up, that's a bit loud and a bit obvious. But that's at a point where it just doesn't sound sort of dry and lonely, and it starts to fit with the band. In this song, it's actually the guitar player playing the bass and the bass player playing the guitar. And he plays it a little bit more expressively. It's not your kind of rock solid holding down the groove bass line. Bounce and a groove that I really like in the track. I'm putting the spring reverb up a bit. We can exaggerate that if you really want to hear it. We've got some backing vocals here. I would just want to play around with some things that might jump out of the mix. We've got this Delay Eternity plugin, which is a ridiculously advanced delay that you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with. Whoa. Oh, I like that. That's really cool. Setting love on fire. I just want to hear that in the mix because the kind of aggressive tin canniness of that. I like it. It sort of wraps around the lead vocal in a really nice way. Whoa. I really like that slap one. Let's see if it actually works or if it interferes with the lead a little bit. For me, it's about how they sit in the mix. And there are a very small number of companies whose products I've got into using where they sit in a way that is more similar to my ears than to the analog stuff. I really like Arturia effects. They've started by modeling things that I really love in the hardware world. They feel right. You don't need to do side-by-side tests. When you put these things on your tracks, they sit and they work with the music in the right way. And that's the thing that really counts.
Being gold and consumed.